Okay, so I am here in Utah. I just touched down a little while ago. I'm here visiting Tyler, and Tommy came in too. We are going to be working on some of our go-to-market strategy for the token stuff. So we decided to come down here to, well, over, I guess, to Utah. And we're just going to do some planning together. We're going to write some content. We're going to do some videos, basically just get our plans all organized for the next 60 days because we got a lot on our plate we got to do. Right now, first up, things that I'm worried about. Well, I'm worried about legal. Basically, I got to get the token minted into custody at least 30 to 60 days in advance of actually doing the ICO, actually the sale. And this is pretty important. People don't think about it, but when you get the token minted, right, it's really important to mint this far in advance of the token being for sale so that it doesn't technically have a price yet, right? What do I mean by price? Well, most important thing to know about crypto is that you're probably going to get hit at some point with a really big tax bill. And what you don't want to do is create a token and give potentially millions of dollars of it worth to people when it's actually worth nothing, and then force them to pay taxes on that. Because we know how volatile crypto is, right? We all imagine our token is going to the moon and it's going to be worth millions of dollars. But the reality is that a lot of this stuff takes a long time to accrue value, if ever, right? And sometimes it accrues value and goes up and down and up and down. And what your investors really want is they want to know what they're paying taxes on. Because if you were to give them a token on the day of the ICO, let's say, here's some project that's, bonkers and it's got some crazy high FTV type of situation, low float thing, and a high price per token, investors might be getting some big chunk of tokens that look on paper like millions of dollars, but are actually not worth that at all. But the IRS doesn't care. They're going to be charging you millions of dollars in taxes on top of it. So what you have to do is you have to actually mint the token before there's any sort of idea of there being a price for the token, right? It needs to be minted when the token is realistically, provably, and really without a doubt worth nothing, right? So you have to do this far in advance of the sale. So what does that mean? That means that the TGE, the token generation event, that has to happen a long time before the ICO, right? At least 30 days. 60 is better. You don't want anything close where the IRS can say well, your sale is coming up and you probably thought it was going to be trading around this price, and therefore we're going to value that price, right? Because that now means all the employees, all the team, all the folks that might be getting tokens as part of the TGE, they might be on the hook for some crazy tax bill. And so you really need to focus on that. So that's the other thing I got to work out. I got to sign up tax accountants, because when you do something like this, the tax implications of creating a token are also pretty crazy. So first, you have to make sure that you're getting the token out at a price that's not going to screw over all the people that are participating. So ideally as close to zero as possible. Now, even that process has got a little bit more of a process to it, because what you have to do is you have to go get a third-party evaluation of how much your token and protocol is actually worth. Because when you give it to the investors, actually you can't give it to them and say, hey, it's worth zero, right? It does actually have some sort of price, but what you got to do is you have to figure out what that price is. Now, there's a lot of different frameworks for evaluating or coming up with a price for a token that isn't trading and nobody's ever heard of yet. And that's maybe a little bit much to go into. But basically, there's firms that they will look at your protocol, look at everything that you've built, and come up with what they think is a fair value price for your token. So in this case, we have a firm that we're using. They are producing a token valuation, protocol valuation for us that we can use when we do the TG and mint the token to go to investors and team, et cetera, right? But for that, I'm a little bit behind, right? Because they need a lot of documentation. For example, how much did the protocol cost to make? Right? So you might be talking about okay, what are all the engineering hours that we put into this so far? If we had audits, who did the audits? How much did the audits cost? Right? If you've got 5 engineers working on it 24 hours a day for 6 weeks, well, you multiply their hourly rate or however much you pay them plus the time. Then you got to take into account how much money you've raised, how much the company is worth. All these things go into what's considered the valuation of the protocol, right? So we got to get that valuation of the protocol. Then we need to get the tax accountants, because I can't even tell you, once you get this token, once you get it out and you have a protocol, it's a whole new tax nexus that shows up, because the IRS sometimes can just look at a smart contract and see a whole bunch of tokens in there and be like, who owns that? and who pays taxes on it, right? And it might sound like it's really easy to just do something like, hey, we've got the money in an account that's just sitting on a smart contract. Nobody owns it. It doesn't accrue any revenue or something like that. So there shouldn't be any taxes. But, that also depends really widely on your jurisdiction. So if you think about it, some places now, I think it's the Netherlands, are actually taxing people on unrealized capital gains. Think about that for a moment. Taxed on unrealized capital gains. So what that means is that you could be building a protocol, have a treasury, and depending on where you are locating it legally, which is a whole other thing you got to get into, right? You could get taxed on unrealized capital gains. So that token that potentially gets issued at near zero price and now goes on an ICO, and now maybe you're going to get something that's worth millions or hundreds of millions in a market cap. Theoretically, you might owe taxes. You might owe taxes on it. That's a crazy idea. So yeah, I got to get the tax accountants engaged. That's another thing I need to do. I also got to get that valuation done. That's another thing to do. This is a big blocker because we also have to go and notify the investors that we are going to issue a token, because as part of our warrant, we actually have to tell the investors in advance that we're going to do a token. And there's a whole host of stuff that's got to come through there too, right? That's when you mint it, TGE, now you got to mint it into qualified custodians, because when you raise money and you're working with top tier VCs like Tally has, they're going to require you, when you create that token, to go put it directly into a qualified custodian like Anchorage or BitGo or Fireblocks or something like that. So anyway, we have a lot to do this week here in Salt Lake. We're going to cover a lot of stuff. I'm going to get into some of these topics that I just told you about here. Probably not all of it because it's a lot, but I think they each deserve their own section. So just giving you a little update.